Hi, Tom. Welcome to the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, I do appreciate your time and you coming on to share your story. For those listeners at the moment, Tom's hailing from Houston, Texas. It's a little after 9 p.m. his time, so we certainly appreciate you coming on at a late hour.
Sure, not a problem.
Yeah. Tom, I'm really interested in your story. The whole Buy, Grow, Sell podcast, we talk about people buying and growing and selling businesses. It's a podcast for business owners and entrepreneurs. Um, and we do typically pick on a transaction for a lot of people, taking a look at their perspective as often the seller and what that journey was like. Now, I'm really interested in your journey because you actually did a couple of acquisitions along the way before ultimately selling. And I think that's going to give us a really interesting edge to this discussion.
Yes, no, absolutely. Along my journey, that was one of the ways I thought would be the best way to grow the business at a good pace, at the pace that I wanted to. So I do have the
Yeah.
experience on both sides, which is kind of nice of buying and selling.
Yeah, cool. So you started the business Pro Design Landscape. Maybe you could just talk us through the early stages and kind of what led you to that business and getting things going.
Yeah, absolutely. Originally, when I first started, I had the entrepreneurial spirit, I would say, in my high school years. I did have a small business at that time. I was a go-getter, and my business was in the lawn care landscaping business here in Houston, Texas, which is pretty predominant in this area. And I grew. I started this probably, I would say, roughly. It was about 1990. I started as a in high school and grew it up to a point to where um, I had enough business to where my dad noticed it was pretty significant. I sold the company to him, believe it or not. So I sold it to him. I went away to college. I had to get my college degree, no matter what. It didn't matter. I wanted to get the education through that. So I got basically a landscape architecture degree and came back and worked briefly for the largest landscape company in Houston, Texas. And the reason why I specifically want to do that is, of course, just pick their brain, see how the big operation works. My whole goal was I knew exactly what I was going to do, get back into my own line of business, but I wanted to use their time and money. So I did that for about a year. And then I started I guess, basically my second landscaping business and went in competition with my dad with my old customers, which was fine. It worked out okay. He did a little bit of lawn maintenance. I did a lot of the landscape installs. And then we joined everything in 2000. From there, it was slow growth and slow, steady growth, 5% a year, maybe. Just slow, steady growth. But then I got to a slow point, I would say, probably in around 2008. There was a dip in the economy. And right after that, I probably say about 2009, I went ahead and looked to go ahead and buy a company, which I did. I bought a small company to just add to my business. I wanted to grow, and what I wanted to do was it was very important in the area that I grew. It had to be a tight knit area. Reason being is because you're paying these employees and you're paying them for windshield time, drive time. So if they're not out on the job, they're not making you money. So I did the acquisition specifically in those areas to grow little by little and grow more crews and more employees. I did an acquisition in nine, an acquisition in 10, going into 11, and then I did my real big acquisition in 2012, July 12. And then that acquisition in 12, basically, I tripled the size of my company. I was the little guy, and I took the big leap of faith and did that, and then grew all the way until 2000 and 2020 in the midst of COVID, and actually got to sell in the midst of COVID. So
Wow.
it worked out okay.
That's a interesting story. I want to get to some of the acquisition stuff and some of the thinking that went into that. But before we do that, I'm just curious. You were obviously had that entrepreneurial spirit. You were getting into doing lawns and clearly a motivated guy from a very young age. I'm I'm interested as to, what drives an entrepreneur, like what makes people want to get out there and do this stuff, and I'm curious, did your father or mother, was there any other major sort of influences in your life that kind of modeled this entrepreneurial behavior or had a big influence on you?
I would probably say my father was a big driving force. Now, my father just was just old school work guy, and he always told me, you live in the best country, you feel in the best country in the world. You have all these opportunities. You can do it if you just got to work for it. Nothing's handed to you.
Yeah,
So I just had that drive as a kid to always just get out and hustle. Even when I was 12, 13 years old, I'd have my bike and pull my mower behind me with tied up with a weed eater and blowers or whatever, just to go and hustle and make a buck. There's always a way to make a dollar if you're willing to work. But that's the thing, is nothing's given to you. So I
yeah.
was very driven personally myself to go out there and always get a buck. And you can do it. And you just got to be willing to put the work in.
Yeah, totally agree. It's funny. I often get asked the question what was my first business, and I kind of chuckle and say it depends on what you define as a business. If you're talking about when I registered my first corporation and I had a tax number and a blah blah blah, well, that's one story. But I always laugh and say my first business was I was 8 years old, crawling around in the muck, pulling out golf balls that golfers were not willing to go and get, and washing them and selling them back to them.
Come back, it is absolutely, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of driven with certain entrepreneurs that are that way. They just have that the drive to go and
Yeah,
get it. Some people may be timid about it with entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs have to take the risk. Some are
yeah,
calculated, some are big risk, and unfortunately, with a lot of businesses, I think 1 out of 5 make it after 2 years or so. I don't know what the true fact number is, but not too many of them make it.
yeah.
Everyone thinks it's just so easy to be their own boss. Well, there's a lot more to that than just being your own boss. So, I think you just have to drive. You have to have that drive if you want to be that entrepreneur and that go getter.
Yeah, look, I totally agree, and look, the business stats don't lie, right? I mean, if it was that easy, we wouldn't see the kind of failure rates in businesses that we do, and
Exactly.
um, that it leads me to another question because it's you do look at those failure numbers, and one can't help but ask, why do so many businesses fail? And I think you've touched on it. One is work ethic, right? The willingness to put the effort in, do the grind, hustle, 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 be adaptive, all that sort of stuff, right? But I'm curious because listening to what your story and background, it sounds to me like you were really clear about what you wanted to do from a very early stage, right to the point of you went and did the university degree to support it. You got the job to support it. You know, I can't help but wonder, and given my profession and what we do as a company, I can't help but wonder how much does the end result, the end game, how important is that to have a clear idea of your end game early on to give you that purpose, to give you that focus.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is a true blessing because, like I said, I knew, I guess from that age, at 14, 15, 16, that I enjoyed the landscaping I enjoyed not necessarily the lawn maintenance part of it, but the artistic impression and the things you can design from just a blank slate. So I enjoyed that. And I was blessed enough, and it's unfortunate because so many people that are in high school, the junior, senior year, and you say, well, what kind of line of work do you want to get in? And they just shrug their shoulders. They no clue, kind of thing. So I was blessed that I guess I had the vision to go and do what I wanted to go and do. And I had an end game of exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to build this business to a point to where I'd have a nationwide buyer come and buy me out. And I had that end game and that goal in hand, and I was blessed to execute it from start to finish.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic, and congratulations. I mean, it's
Yes,
I
thank
think
you.
there's lots of yeah, I think there's lots of accidental entrepreneurs out there. I think there's lots of people who
Yes,
are they're good at something and they kind of fall into it.
correct.
It yeah, so I think you're in a minority. That is absolutely for certain. But to have that kind of foresight, I think it shows obviously a deep sense of wisdom about you. You're obviously an old soul, I would say.
So many people tell me that as well too. I even to the music I listen to, I guess. But also just old school work ethic, and I think I bless that on my parent. My mom was a hard worker too. I bless it
Yeah.
on both of them to that they raised a good kid. I guess did okay. So kudos to them.
Yeah.
They did okay. So I'm blessed that again, old school. Just work hard, nose to the grindstone, and you can make it happen. You got to be able to put in the work and the sacrifices.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great advice. I'm curious. You mentioned that you had this long-term goal to sell to a national, provider. When you're thinking about those things in those early days, and I know we're going back a little while here, but it's just, I'm curious, like, what's driving that sense of the end game? I mean, is it we all have a number in our heads, but is it hey, if I could earn this much, or if I could sell a company for this much, I'm set up for life, or is it like, are there other motivators? What are the kind of drivers for that type of vision?
I think one of the other kind of drivers is maybe because I was into business as of for so long since a younger age. It was starting to feel a little bit of the burnout coming, and so I was to a point to where I wanted to, and what I'm kind of gearing towards now to, wanted to sell this business. I know eventually I'm going to get into some other kind of business, but it will be something for me that's a lot less employees. Um, I had a lot of employees, so that was a big driving factor in a way for me um, to eventually sell out and get something that's a little, I guess, less stressful. Business is stressful either way, no matter how you look at slice or dice it. I wanted to probably, I'm looking for a change a little bit. And I think that I finally got that after probably being in it 25 years. I'd say probably in 2016 to 17, I was like, we're going to build this a little bit more, and then it's time to cut this thing loose, move on to something else, and cash in, of course, and do some other reinvestments for passive income, and move on
Yeah.
to something else that's a little less stressful.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. I think, certainly from the businesses I've run, and the many, many, many business owners I talk to, I think when you've got a business where there's a lot of people, but B, they're doing work that is, albeit maybe only even a slightly higher risk, but there is a greater risk of physical harm.
Oh yes,
Um, it just it. I had a business in the solar space. We had people climbing around on roofs. Like, that's, you fall, you could either die or be, massively be paralyzed, injured for life, that sort of stuff. Um, it adds an additional layer of stress that
absolutely it
certainly.
does.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I sit in an office, so do most of our staff. Somebody might get a paper cut. It's, they're not going to lose any fingers from it, though.
Yeah, no, I think, and you hit the nail on the head exactly, and that was in 16, I was thinking about selling. Uh, 17, I had a very major accident, a freak accident with one of my employees that a mower was mowing by a railroad track. We had a city property that we were doing, and it kicked up a railroad spike and it flung it across the field and hit this guy in the hand and just decimated his hand.
Oh,
And
wow.
just complete freak accident. And no, even the guy mowing couldn't see him. It was so it's one of those things that you think back, oh my God, how blessed I am for him and his family that this could have went hit his head or neck or and then shortly thereafter, another year later, we had another guy that had a very bad ankle accident that had to go through some surgery as well. So those things add massive stress to you because you don't want anyone to ever get hurt. Of course, there's insurances and stuff like that that cover it, but that's just that extra added stress. Like I said, if it was office jobs, the worst thing maybe a paper cut, or yeah. But when you're doing physical stuff, where I've had guys with different pieces of machineries, whether it be chainsaws or hedge trimmers, sharp blades, that where it adds that much of a more of a stress to you. And
Yeah.
I think that's for sure in 18 is when I said enough is enough. I'm ready to move on, and it put a lot of stress on me. A few more gray
Yeah.
hairs in my head.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, look, I totally get that. So talk to me a little bit. Let's go back a little bit to you've started businesses, you've started to run them, you sold to your dad. You've been through this kind of already. You've already kind of had a mini MBA, a practical MBA handed to you, or you've earned it. What's the thinking when you start to look at a new acquisition? How did you decide what makes a good company to buy versus a maybe not so good company?
I think the best thing for that was being in the line of business and doing the acquisition. That was great because you know the pitfalls, you know what to look for. This is a very scary situation for someone who's new and literally, no pun intended, but green to the industry, that they're jumping into a business that they've never done before. So for me, it was a little easier on this acquisition of looking for the key factors for me, which were, what are we looking at profit margins wise per each customer? Where are we looking location? That was the biggest. One of the bigger driver factors for me was all I wanted to do was just add to the pile of where I was at in such a close knit area. For me, it was drive time. Ideally, in a perfect world, I'd love for just the crew to unload once and then mow the whole street if it was residential, or be at one commercial location for 8 hours because it was that load and unload and that drive time for me. So that was one of the factors, was location. Obviously, the profitability. What were they looking to charge for each customer? Those were some of the big things. You look at employees. That was a little bit of a factor as well. Are they going to mesh with the current employees that I have? Because that's always a little bit of an issue as well. Um, Another big factor for me was I didn't necessarily. I ran my business very militaristically, that all the mowers needed to be the same name. Everything. I didn't have mishmash equipment. So
Yeah,
I looked very professional in the way of everything. All the equipment was the same. So a lot of times on those acquisitions, I didn't look as much for the equipment part, but locations and profitability for each one of them. And I went through quite a few of them because, as any business owner thinks, their business is the biggest and the best, and they want the top dollar for it. Well, they for people who are trying to sell, they got a rude awakening. So you got to look at what is the best profitability, and if it was EBITDA numbers, or revenue. In my aspect, revenue didn't mean much because you had a big overhead with your labor, so really had to look at the profitability numbers on that. So that's what I look
yeah.
for a lot of times in my line of business.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I think you talk about profitability, and you've mentioned customer metrics and how they charge and all that, and they're all, yeah, I will just broadly call them the fundamentals of a business, right? Like that's the stuff that people go to first. But I'd like to just pick up one comment that you made there, because I find this really quite interesting. Locality. You talked about that local
Yes,
region, right? And I guess
yes.
when I think about acquiring businesses, or I think about helping sell a client's business, I'm always looking for an opportunity where 1 + 1 = 3, not two. Where is that point of leverage where it's not just about the financials and the ratio? There's something extra in the mix, and I think, for those people who are familiar with an Ansoff matrix, that's what that kind of tool is for. But for you, I think it's, people doing a similar service, but in the similar area, sounds to me like that's that point of leverage. Like there's no point just adding another service if you lose efficiencies and you lose those sort of economies of scale. Is that a fair comment?
Yes, and for the most part too, what helped me is I had Houston's a very big city. You add Houston, Galveston area, it's a city of almost 6 million people. You can drive from one side of Houston to the other and drive literally 50 minutes on a freeway, and you're still in the city limits.
Yeah,
So my area was the southeast quadrant of Houston, so I specialized in that area, and I didn't go outside of that. The pitfalls, I think, for a lot of landscape companies, they just would grab this and grab that that. Well, their drive time was so far, they didn't have any other customers. So it was just break even or they were losing money and to get just because they wanted to get customers. So for me, it was locality. The other thing is if there was a couple of other neighborhoods in that locality that I really didn't get into yet in this acquisition, they had some, which was great. I acquire it, and all of a sudden I have instant presence there,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
I can grow from there as well. So that was a big thing for me was the locality in the drive time to where I had such a huge cluster in such a little area. But it took me on the slow growth time in the early years, it took me quite a while because I turned down so much because it was, hey, I'm so far away here or there, and I'm sorry, we don't go that far. So then I said, where are we at to make this grow a little quicker? Well, let's look at some acquisitions and see, let's acquire some other customers and buy out some other companies. So that's how I started to grow in that
Yeah.
locality as well.
Yeah. That's cool. I like it. A quick question. I find with so many businesses, they, especially when they're geographically kind of bound a bit, like your business was, the temptation is to say, okay, well, look, we do lawns and landscaping, right? Just broadly speaking. But look, we already have these customers. We have a relationship, and I find that with a lot of business owners, there's this temptation to maybe we should offer these people other services.
Yes.
I'm going to use a random example here, but Tom's in business doing landscaping and lawns, but maybe I start offering cleaning services because I'm already at the house. As a kind of cross sell example. Did you ever have that temptation, and if so, how did you deal with it?
I did not have that temptation because there's so many of them out there, and I call them the jack of all trades and master of none. Okay,
Yeah,
I found my niche and I stuck with it. Now, there's so many other things that I did not do in the landscaping industry, or like installation of putting greens, or during Christmas time to install Christmas lights on your customers' houses and stuff like that. There's just so many. I subbed out my fertilization. I didn't want to get into fertilization and have a whole program for that. And I subbed out my irrigation. So I just had my niche of certain customers and just kept building and building and building. That is the problem, I think, with a lot of the landscaping industry I can speak for, is there's something to grab, well, let me grab this, let me grab that. And next thing you know, their quality goes to pot, and they're not specializing in the certain niches that they do. And I never had that temptation. I had that vision to look past that. You're going to make money. You're going to make money if you're good at it, and you're going to keep growing. You don't need to grab this and grab that because I had slow growth, but I wanted to keep everything under control and not just grow. The problem is we have rapid expansion, and then your quality goes left and things start falling through the cracks. So I kept it really tighten it that way, and I didn't have any temptations to do any extra side work or side jobs that you could do, say. So I always told
yeah,
people, I joke around with them on estimates to say, look, I do lawns, I don't do windows, I don't do paint, I don't do all this
yeah.
extra construction stuff. We just stick with the green industry, and that's what we did with that.
So when you're looking at an acquisition in your particular industry, did you come into it with an idea of how to value these type of businesses already?
Good question on that. You know what? When I first did my first one, no, I did not. There was kind of some standard rules of thumbs where they play. You say you pay X value, X times value, or a month's worth of gross for each if it was a residential customer, et cetera, et cetera. Um, the two acquisitions that the first two I didn't have true EBITDA numbers or evaluation on the company, so it was more based on. I kind of knew you're in the business already, which was great, so you kind of know the numbers and the profitability of what it should be for each per se each customer on the
Yep.
list. So, but I didn't have a formula going into it the first two. The third one I did. Because the third one, I really, really wanted to be sure, since I was going to be tripling the size of the company, that I was making the right move. And I was taking a big
Yeah,
plunge too.
that makes
So
sense.
there I had a little bit better idea as for purchasing that company.
And do businesses like yours, you talked about a multiple of EBITDA. We talk about that sort of stuff on the show a little bit, but is there a typical range that businesses in the landscaping kind of world trade at?
Yeah, for the most part, you're at a three to, you could go all the way up to a six. I haven't seen many of those in the industry, but 3 to 5 is about your multiple on EBITDA for
Yeah.
that, for this line of it.
Yeah.
Now, there's a little bit of a, I guess, a curve to that in a way too, because you got to look at, there's so much, we had so much equipment. So when we saw there was an asset purchase sale, in the way of, you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars of trucks and trailers and mowers and skid steers and dump trucks and et cetera, all that to add to that. So you got to look at, there's a little bit of a slight curve to that EBITDA number, depending on the multiple that you want to pay.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And certainly in my experience too, the bigger the company, typically they attract better multiples as well, just because of the
Of course,
scale aspect of it. But
sure.
yeah, that's interesting. Um, Other than when you're looking to acquire a company, other than looking at the financials and making sure that all those boxes are being ticked, how important is it? How important is your intuition and gut feel around the buyer themselves?
Yeah, that's a huge thing. I guess the plus for me, since I was trying to do acquisitions in the area of where I already was existing, it's kind of one of those tight knit things. Well, you know about this owner for this company, that owner for that company. So there, you always go in there with a lot of apprehension or caution, going in there. And I I was blessed on the sell side for me not to be as worried to sell to a local competitor, because you're always, your biggest thought was, oh, you're opening the books, you're telling them exactly what the contract numbers are with everything. What are they going to do to, even though you signed that non-disclosure, what's to prevent them to come a year or 2 years later to come after those customers because they have numbers. So that was a big concern for me, going into it. You had to have some, going in there with, some caution, who you're dealing with, and talking to other landscapers and what their dealings are with. You had allies, and then you had, it wouldn't necessarily call them enemies, but guys you really just wouldn't want to, in touch with a 10-foot pole. Keep
Yeah,
away from those
yeah.
kind of guys. So I had a little bit of apprehension, of course, every buy. I think that goes for any business that's going to buy. They're going to have some apprehension. But when you're in the same line of business in the same locality, it escalated a little bit more.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. It's funny, isn't it? But, like the numbers tell a story, but there's a whole context around that story as well, right?
Of course,
I guess it sounds like you were able to kind of really triangulate people a bit. And of course, you never know
yes.
100% what they're thinking, but, I guess that additional context is very helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you've heard in the line of business where, you sign these non-competes, and boy, how many of them are right after or even before, they're jumping right back into business. So you got to be very careful with that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, non-competes, confidentiality, all this sort of stuff. I mean, any contract is only as good as the money you're willing to throw at it to defend it, right?
No,
Which
that's
which
exactly
means
right.
lawyers and courts, and I don't think anybody really wants to spend money on that path. So yeah, you do have to be
Yeah.
careful. I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, so that's been really interesting from the buy side, and I think you know I have one last question on that, and then I'd sort of like to talk a little more about your actual exit, but when I look at growing my business and when I talk to other business owners about growing theirs, at a very high simplistic level, there's really two levers you could pull, right? You either build it or you buy it.
Exactly.
And yeah, and I'm curious. Was there a reason that you leaned into buying? I mean, I'm sure you were trying to grow organically as well, but clearly you didn't just take the step to look at acquisitions. You did it a number of times. So, you know, clearly that was a pretty big commitment to that strategy. Is there a reason you chose that over perhaps more the organic growth?
Yes, because of the fact of if you add time is money. So if you added is sending an estimator out, or if you added all the marketing to keep growing, you add those numbers to where you can go instead and put that dollar into something that you know you're going to get on I guarantee you got instant presence and customers immediately on the day of sale. To me, was a much easier way of growing instead of growing organically. It was a quicker
Yeah,
way of growing and buying strategically in the way of, like I said, locality was a big thing for me. Now we still, of course, we grew organically, but it was a very slow growth because I didn't advertise too much. The advertisement for me, and I always said in business, is your best form of advertisement is word of mouth, or it could be your
yeah.
worst enemy. If you do good, you're going to do great, and people are going to talk and rave about you. But if you do bad, believe me, they're the first ones nowadays on social media that a lot of Karens out there that'll call you out. So I did a lot of that. For me, my best path was acquisitions. After I was in the line of business for so long, I knew what to look for. If you're an entrepreneur that's looking just to buy a business that you haven't really have any experience with, you got to really throw up a lot of caution flags and be sure you're making the right move with that.
Yeah, a lot more risk. Yeah, totally agree. Um, so let's shift gear if we can. I mean, you've bought these businesses, you've been growing. Now, your final acquisition, you said, was three times the size of or it took your company to three times the size. So at least I imagine it was at least double the size of your business. That's an unusual thing where the mouse swallows the elephant
Yeah.
type thing.
Right. Yeah. That's how I felt. And that was in 2012. And I felt very overwhelmed for that year to year and a half until I finally got everything under one hat and one umbrella to where I was comfortable with. But it was a huge leap of faith for me. Now looking back, of course, I'm glad I did it. But it was a scary, I can't say scary time in a way of I wasn't in any financial distress. I was just more emotionally and mentally distressed, and that can bring you down if you got to be able to drive and grind through it. And that's where a lot of people won't, and they'll fail. So I was blessed in that aspect. I was
Yeah.
the little man buying I was the little person buying the big man stuff. So, but I'm glad I did do that.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting story. I mean, did when you did that acquisition, did you need to get external funding through banks and stuff like that, or was it self-funded at
Yes.
that point?
No, yeah, I did have to get external funding through that. It would have been nice, of course, to do that, but I was blessed enough to have the banking source that I had been working with for a while. That trusted me, knew my growth, knew I was in the line of business, so they were willing to work with me a little bit more. In the fact, since I was already in that line of business, buying another line of business that was the same,
Yeah.
I was blessed with that.
Yeah, yeah, great. I'm starting to get a really clear idea why you might have been feeling a bit burned out, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of the stress amount over time. It got to me to where the fact of I got three beautiful children. Right now, their current ages are 16, 13, and 11. But when you're talking three little kids that are whatever 2, 5, 7, they put a tremendous amount of stress on me with family life and trying to be the father there, to be there for all of their stuff as well. So it did get to stress enough to where I said, I think, enough is enough. We're going to get to a certain goal, and then we're going to cash in and do something different.
Yeah, yeah. Look, once again, makes a lot of sense. And I hope you don't mind me saying this and sharing this, but obviously we were chatting just before we jumped online, and you'd come from your son's football practice. So,
Yep.
good on you. And I'm glad you're able to do that sort of stuff now.
Absolutely. That was another big driving force for the reason why I did sell is so many people through their lives, whether they're a business owner or work, they work so much and they miss a lot of their kids' stuff. And then when they finally have a financial leg that where they can take it and gear back a little bit, the kids are gone. And
Yeah.
I am so blessed. I get to enjoy this now, and I get to be the football coach and baseball coach, whatever, get to see my girls play volleyball. And that was another driving factor for me was, hey, if I can enjoy this stuff now, why not? We're financially great. We got a lot of passive income coming in now too. So that was another big driving factor for me to sell.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I really like that. So I think we've got a good idea or the sense of the emotional drivers for you to start thinking about exiting. And obviously there's financial benefits. Can you talk us through the process? I mean, was there a point in time that did you wake up one day and go, right, that's it, I want to sell, or was it more gradual than that, or what did it look like when you started down that path?
When it started down that path, and here's a great I guess, word of advice is so many entrepreneurs or have their businesses just think, oh, it's going to be so easy. I'm done. I'm a cash and I'm a sell. When you for me, you needed to get a financial review of your business, have an independent third party come in there and truly go through your tooth and comb of all your financials to see where you set financially to even get that correct EBITDA number. Um, for me, uh, the process took, I think I wanted to sell, we listed early 2018. We didn't sell until in the midst of COVID in June of 2020. So it was over a 2-year process it took when I finally said, yes, let's pull the trigger and we're going to make this happen. Um, uh, 1 out of 100, I think that's the true ratio number. About 1 out of 100 businesses are ready to sell immediately at that time. The other 99 think they're ready to sell, and then when they get the financial review done, they're like, oh, this is ridiculous. This is all I can get for this. Well, that's what the going rate is for that. So a lot of people, not like I said, the 99% think they're ready and they're not. I did my financial review, and when I did my financial review, they're like, well, we can put it up on the market, but the biggest key for this is you really got to be able to drive your business and grow it exponentially now, the big push. Well, this is so hard for an entrepreneur who finally decides he's going to sell. They're like, they're already kind of cashed in and they're like, I'm done and I'm burned out of this business and I don't really want to push that much harder. My word of advice is you got to push that much harder to really make it look like this is something that's, hey, this business is really taken off now. Should be a good buy and a no brainer. So for me, it was a longer process. I had to do a financial review. I had a great business acquisition company that I uh, did hire that was phenomenal, that worked with me. I had a set number in mind to exit. I wasn't going to go any less than that. There was no need for me to go less. The company's making money. We're doing good. I do not need to lower my price. If anything, I'll try to get in a bid war and see if we can get a higher asking price. And that's exactly what happened in the tail end of 18, the beginning of 19. The tail end, I had 2 or 3 different offers.
Yep.
and I said no to them. And the reason why I said no, they just weren't the right. I just didn't get the right feel. I wanted, of course, as a business, it's your baby. Yeah, you grew it. You want it to succeed and do good. So you want to be able to transition this off to someone that you feel could be doing good for the company and growing. And one of the persons I didn't feel so well with that. The other two, they were a little under the numbers that I wanted to sell at. So I went back to the business acquisition company that I was using. They said, you know what, Tom, grow it another year. We're going to take it off the market and grow. Well, we'll keep it on the market just kind of on a down low if we have any calls. We're going to take it off the market. And to me, that was like a punch in the gut because I was like, I
Yeah.
already had in my mind, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to sell. I'm ready to exit. Yet I took this advice and then I grew it that much more. I had to drive and grind. I said, look, there's an end mark, I know, but it's so hard. It was hard for me because you're already you cashed out, you feel like you're done and but you had to drive and make it that much more appeasing for a possible buyer. We relisted it back again. In 19, I grew, relisted it back again in February of 20. And finally, in April of 2020, right when COVID began, we had a bite. And it was a bite, and it was the correct cash in amount of what I wanted. And it worked out beautifully. And
Yeah. Nice.
and it worked out good. And the fact for us with COVID, we were an essential business. We were working outside anyways. The grass was still growing. It still needed to be maintained. And with the local authorities or whatever, we could keep going. So we were supposed to close in April of 20. I had the offer actually in February of 2020. We were supposed to close in April 1st. He said, no, I want to see the numbers for April. Not a problem.
Yep.
Just showed him neighbor. He said, let me go one more month. Let me see May. We went May, not a problem. He saw that nothing dipped. No, we were still cut. We had all our customers. Everything was going. So he said, okay, June 2020, we ended up closing and we sold the
Yeah.
company.
Well, congratulations. I mean, it's, one, to be able to suck it up and take the gut punch and move on and do what you got to do. I mean, it just,
Yes.
that there's a theme here I'm hearing is that you've got that ability and the work ethic to grind through and get things done. It's, and I think that seems to be a common trait with the people I talk to that are successful. So, so well done. Congrats.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Like I said, I had a goal and set in mind, and from the beginning to the end, and I persevered and grinded through it, and finally got to my end goal to sell
Yeah.
and to sell for the number that I wanted to sell for, and
Yeah.
I truly feel blessed.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Cognizant of time here, Tom, but what are you doing these days now that you're, somewhat a man of leisure?
That's exactly right. I was blessed enough with the company. I did never sold the commercial real estate that went with it, so I have lease there and passive income. 2 years before I sold my company, I bought another commercial building. I had passive income there. From the sale of the company, I bought another commercial building, has passive income. I'm building another one currently right now. So what I'm working on is a lot of the commercial real estate with passive income. I went ahead, had a buddy of mine said, "Go get your real estate license, commercial, real estate license." So I did. I told him I wasn't going to work 40 hours a week, which I'm not. I said, "Hey, I'm gonna come and go as I please," and he was like, "Fine, just do it," because he knew I had a lot of contacts. So I do some commercial real estate, a little bit, dabble into that, and building some other properties. And for me, it's just about passive income. And I have gotten a little bored, believe it or not. It's been over 2 years to where I was looking to possibly buy another business. But I'm not in a huge rush with that right now because I'm enjoying the hell out of my kids, and what a
Yeah.
blessing that is, and get to be with them. And I don't mind being Mr. Mom for sometimes, just to enjoy that. So I
Yeah.
probably will dabble and get into another business of some sort, but as of right now, it's all of passive income with real estate, and blessed I could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fabulous. Tom, I imagine there might be a few listeners who'd love to reach out to you. I mean, are you okay if people reach out to connect?
Absolutely, I am. I have a business brokerage as well that I dabble a little bit with to help some other companies try to sell. And they can reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn at Tom Farinacci, and I'm also, if you want an email, it's Tom.Farinacci at outlook.com, and that's TOM.FARINACCI at outlook.com. And if they want to reach out to me that way, we can. I'd be glad to do that. I've had multiple people come out and just to get some pointers or some just if to do some consulting work to get them on the right track, and I'll be glad to help them if they're wanting to need the help.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Well, look, yeah, it's a very generous offer. I certainly appreciate it, and I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your story with us. We'll certainly put the links and those email and everything else in the notes for the show, so people can reach out.
Perfect.
To those listening, if you do reach out to Tom, please do him the courtesy of at least letting him know that you heard him being interviewed on this podcast, so he at least knows where you're coming from and has a bit of context as to why you're reaching out. But Tom, finally, I'm so grateful. Thank you for your time, for sharing. You've been a generous man. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and yeah, you're. I'm just so happy for you that you've landed where you are.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate you having me on the show. And like I said, it would be nice if there was some kind of written manual about being an entrepreneur and all the pitfalls. I mean, there's a lot of pluses too. But anything I can do to help anyone out there, I greatly appreciate it. It's no problem.